The sun hung low over the Arizona sky, bleeding orange and red across the desert as if the land itself had been wounded. The wind pushed dust past the small failing ranch of Luke Carver, a man who had little more than a patched-up cabin, a stubborn mule, and a stretch of land so dry that even the tumbleweeds seemed to avoid it. He was poor in every way a man could be, except in heart, though that wasn't something he ever admitted. Life had beaten him down too many times. His crops had burned under a relentless drought, his cattle had died off one by one, and loneliness had dug itself into his bones ever since his wife passed years earlier. He was preparing for another night of quiet hunger when he saw movement at the edge of his property, something slow, fragile, and collapsing into the dust. Luke blinked, squinting into the fading light. And then he saw her, a woman with long black hair matted from wind and sand. An Apache widow by her clothing, holding the hands of two small children who could barely stand. Her knees buckled and she fell forward, pulling her children down with her. Luke dropped the bucket he had been filling at the well and ran toward them. When he reached her, he saw the hollow cheeks, the cracked lips, the eyes dark with hunger and fear. Her children clung to her, too weak even to cry. She lifted her head just enough to whisper, her voice breaking in the dry air. "Save my children." Luke swallowed hard, his heart twisting painfully. He knelt beside her. "Ma'am, you three look half a breath from death. What happened?" The woman struggled to speak. "Raiders took our horses, burned our camp. My husband died last winter. No food left. No one to help." Her voice trembled. "Please, save my children." Luke stared at the woman and her two little ones, one girl, maybe 6, and a tiny boy no older than 3. He looked back at his own cabin, the sagging porch, the chimney with barely enough wood stored to last the week, the empty pantry he tried not to think about. He barely had enough to keep himself alive. Taking in 3 more mouths? It was impossible. A death sentence for all of them. But as he looked into the eyes of the Apache widow, he realized something deep and human. These 3 had already accepted death. They weren't pleading for comfort. They were pleading for a chance at one more day. Luke shook his head slowly. The widow's eyes filled with dread, thinking he meant to refuse. But he raised his voice with a steadiness he didn't truly feel. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not saving just your children." He slid his arms under her and helped her sit upright. "I'll save all of you." Tears spilled silently down her face, soaking into the dust. Luke carried her children first, one in each arm, returning for her after settling them gently in his cabin on his only bed. The place was small, drafty, and poor, but that night it held more life than it had in years. He fed them the last of his beans and cornbread food he'd planned to ration for 3 days, and watched as the children devoured the meal with trembling hands. The widow ate slowly, ashamed of taking his food, but Luke insisted. "You eat. You need your strength. I'll figure out tomorrow when it comes." When the children finally slept beside her, huddled together under Luke's patched quilt, the woman lifted her gaze. "Why?" she whispered. Luke sat heavily in the wooden chair across from her. He didn't have a simple answer. He finally said, "Nobody helped me when I needed it. Lost my wife. Lost my herd. Folks passed by, said too bad, and kept writing. I swore I'd never do the same to anyone else." She lowered her head. "I am Nita." Luke nodded. "Luke Carver." That night, the moon rose over the ranch as the wind howled outside the cabin. Luke stayed awake long after Nita and her children slept, thinking of how he was going to keep them alive. He had no money, no working horse, no crops, but he had 2 hands and a stubborn will. Maybe that was enough. At sunrise, he quietly slipped outside to check the land. The drought had killed almost everything, but he noticed something he hadn't before, a Narrow stretch of soil along the creek bed where a few stubborn green shoots pushed through. Maybe they could expand that. Maybe they could plant more. When he got back inside, Nita was sitting up, weak but awake, brushing her daughter's hair with her fingers. She looked embarrassed as Luke walked in, as though she owed him an apology for still being alive. "You should have left us," she murmured. "We are a burden." "You're a family," Luke replied. "Ain't no such thing as a burden when someone's fighting to live." Over the next days, Luke worked like a man possessed. He repaired the old chicken coop, scavenged wood from an abandoned line shack, and set snares to catch rabbits. Nita insisted on helping, even when she could barely stand. She taught him how to track better, how to find edible plants in the desert, how to conserve water in ways he never knew. Her knowledge kept them alive when his supplies were nearly gone. And her children, little Sani and Kaya, brought laughter into the cabin, something Luke thought he'd never hear again. Nights were hardest. Raiders still roamed the land, and Luke's ranch was close enough to trouble that any sound in the dark made him reach instinctively for his rifle. Nita slept lightly too, haunted by memories of her camp burning. One night, when distant gunshots echoed across the canyon, she shook uncontrollably. Luke sat beside her, not touching her, just close enough for her to feel safe. "We won't let them take us," he whispered. "Not while I'm breathing." Slowly, she steadied. Days turned into weeks. Luke and Nita worked the land together, planting what little seed they had left along the creek bed. Sani carried small buckets of water with determination far bigger than his tiny frame. Kaya helped Nita weave baskets they could trade in town. Each day, they scraped a little closer to survival. One afternoon, as Luke mended the fence, he saw dust rising in the distance. 3 riders heading straight toward the ranch. Raiders, his blood ran cold. He yelled for Nita. She rushed outside, saw the riders, and her face paled. "They are the same men," she whispered. "The ones who burned our camp." Luke loaded his rifle. "Get the children inside." "Stay low." She obeyed instantly. When the riders approached, their laughter echoed across the dry land. The leader, a scarred man with a braided beard, sneered. "Heard you took in an Apache woman," he called out. "Thought we'd come take her back. She owes us." Luke leveled his rifle. "She owes you nothing. You come past this fence, you'll regret it." The raiders grinned, amused by the threat of a poor rancher standing alone. One spurred his horse forward. Luke fired a warning shot, kicking dust inches from the horse's hooves. The animal reared, and the rider cursed. The leader's grin faded. "You'll die for her, rancher." Luke tightened his jaw. "If it keeps her and those children alive, then yes." There was a long silence. The wind whistled between them. Then the leader spat into the dirt. "Not worth the trouble. Let's ride." The raiders turned and galloped off, leaving a storm of dust in their wake. Luke lowered the rifle slowly. His hands shook. When he turned toward the cabin, Nita stood in the doorway, tears streaming silently down her face. "You risked your life," she whispered. Luke breathed hard, sweat dripping down his brow. "I told you. I'll save all of you." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "No one has ever fought for us." He swallowed. "Well, they do now." From that day forward, something shifted between them, something gentle yet strong, unspoken yet felt deeply. As the weeks passed, the crops took root. The chickens began laying again. The creek swelled after a rare rainfall. Life slowly returned to the land, as if the earth itself recognized the courage and hope that had taken root there. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in gold, Nita stood beside Luke on the porch, watching Sani and Kaya chase fireflies. She turned to him, her voice soft. "You saved us." Luke shook his head. "No, we saved each other." She slipped her hand into his, surprising him. My children call you Shiji now. It means father. The word struck Luke deeper than any bullet ever could. His eyes stung, and he cleared his throat to hide the emotion choking him. If that's what they want to call me, I reckon I'll earn it. She faced him fully, her dark eyes warm. You already have. Months later, the ranch flourished more than it ever had. People who once rode past without a second glance now stopped to trade, to ask advice, to see the miracle of life growing where there was once only dust. Luke no longer walked alone. Nita was at his side, strong and steady. Sani and Kaya followed him like shadows, calling him father with smiles that healed every scar on his heart. What began with a starving widow whispering for her children's lives ended with a family stronger than blood, stronger than loss, stronger than the desert itself. And Luke, once a poor rancher with nothing left to live for, realized he had gained everything he never dared hope for. Purpose, laughter, love, and the chance to save not just a family, but himself.